What's up, everybody? Welcome to this week's edition of the On Purpose podcast, where it's our mission to be one of the most impactful podcasts in the world. That means sharing stories and insights and thoughts and beliefs and practices that inspire people, challenge people, get people up and moving, get them pursuing dreams again, getting them to even realize that it's okay to dream again. And this week's episode is nothing short of powerful. Let me just tell you that it's powerful. Um, we are blessed to sit down with an author, Alexis Faere, who shares an unbelievable story of resilience, healing, and empowerment in her memoir, Invisible Wounds and Inside Story, in which she recounts an experience and transformation in her life that we wouldn't wish upon anybody. But what's amazing to me is she's taking it and challenge fear to believe over fear and winning over surviving. And she shaped her life and she's on a mission to take her trauma and share it with the world in a very raw and real way to help others heal from their trauma. And the conversation with her, I just couldn't help but admire the strength she shows. And if you're watching this on YouTube, or you'll hear it in her words too, she really lives these moments as she shares the story with us so that we can learn with her and we can grow with her and we can watch her transformation from being a victim of uh, no fault of her own to winning in life and seeing that love beats hate no matter the circumstances. So sit back this week, enjoy this conversation with Alexis Faere. Alexis, my newest friend, welcome to the On Purpose podcast, and thank you so much for coming to talk with us today.
Thank you, Jerrod. It is great to be here.
Yeah, I so I love when I started this whole deal, I just love sharing stories, and I you just never know when one story is going to reach a person and they need it at that right moment. And like you're a perfect example of us being out and sharing stories, and then somehow you found us, right? And we crossed paths, and you're out sharing this amazing story that is truly an honor for us to be able to bring to our community. And I want to just start off by saying thank you for having the courage to share it and know that what you went through can help somebody else out there.
Well, thank you for that. Yeah, kidnap and rape specifically, but kidnap as well, are things that happen every day in our lives, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And people, I know when I was going through my process of recovery and healing, it was really hard for me to come up with language to express the madness that was going on in my head. Being a teenager, that was a lot to deal with, and a lot of adult things
Yeah.
that I wasn't prepared for. And part of why I wrote the book was to help people have an opportunity to uh, find a language to be able to communicate what's going on with them. And I took a very vulnerable, raw approach to it, because that's what's important. That's the meat of it. People have a really difficult time putting all of those big emotional um, things into words.
Yeah. I
I
found
had
that.
a hard time with that.
Yeah. No, that was one of the things I found really fascinating, Alexis, in researching you and studying to get ready for this was just your tenacity to find the right words to describe your feelings. And I started thinking, like, man, are there times I've felt a certain way and I know what I'm feeling, but I just can't share it. I don't know what that word is. And I think that's amazing. I'm excited to get more into the story. But before we do, Alexis, I gotta warm you up. Like we gotta make sure we're ready to go. We can't just jump into the heavy lifting here. Are you ready for your
Okay.
warm-up questions?
Oh, of course I'm ready.
All right, here we go. Sunrises or sunsets?
Oh my goodness. Probably more sunsets now.
Okay, why is that?
Used to be sunrises. I used to go to work at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Oh,
So having sunrises were always a treat during that process. But now that I'm retired, I have shifted my schedule a little bit. I'm a little later in the process. And
I love it.
so sunsets, definitely.
All right, here's a new one for you. Song on repeat. So a song you're currently listening to over and over.
Oh my goodness. That's a tough one. I am a huge Alan Parsons fan.
Alan
So
Parsons.
Alan Parsons Project.
Oh yeah, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So turn on some Alan Parsons and I'm a happy girl.
That's like 70s rock, right?
Yeah, it is.
Okay. All right. I remember that.
Absolutely.
My dad used to listen to that stuff. All right. Favorite book.
Um, I that is a hard one because there are so many amazing books out there, but I have
Favorite book you
been
want to share that I'm gonna read. How about that one?
favorite that you're gonna read.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because that's really
Well,
why, if I'm being honest, that's really why I do this, so I can find new books to read. And like, if you liked it and you learned something, like, okay, maybe I should read that one.
yeah, yeah. Well, yours was an amazing
Oh,
book.
well, thank
Yes,
you.
yes. But I think I've always been a Sark fan. I don't know if you're familiar at all with Sark,
Uh-uh.
but her books have always been a way for me to harness my creativity.
Mm,
And she is also good she's an author that speaks very real and in everyday terms,
mm.
and I love reading her books because they are like reading a personal letter.
Oh, wow.
It's like opening a book and having a 75 page or whatever page letter from her. It's just amazing. But
Okay.
anyway, there have been lots of Sark books. Uh, Succulent Wild Woman, Thirsty Pen, Juicy Pens, Thirsty Paper. When I was exploring becoming an author, that was a
Yeah.
great one for me.
Yeah. That's it.
um, so anyway, yeah,
Very cool.
Sark, I recommend
Sorry.
it.
All right. You get to have dinner with one person, Alexis. Who would you have dinner with and what would you want to ask them?
You know, I have thought about that question several times actually in my life, but one that I would really like to spend time with is, and he's unfortunately not here anymore, but Dan Fogelberg. He had such his lyrics in his songs are have a lot of depth to them, and I just imagine that he had to have been a person that had that realness in his heart,
Right.
and would have loved to have sat down and chat with him.
Oh,
Um,
yeah, that'd be a
anyway,
good one. All right. Memorable quote or saying that
oh
stays with you.
goodness, a memorable quote. Um, Let me see. Let me look at my wall
Yeah,
here
there you
because
go.
uh, you are not a human being having a spiritual experience. You are a spiritual being having a human experience.
That is a good
That's
one.
a Wayne Dyer thing. But
Yeah.
anyway,
What's
yeah.
that mean to you?
Well, we are spiritual beings, whether we choose to admit it or not. We are.
Right.
And uh, I think we oftentimes forget to listen to what's going on in our hearts. And it is helpful to me with the experience I've gone through and why I wrote the book, or shared this story, was getting reconnected with that part of myself.
Yeah.
Um, one of the things I did in that process was I forgot to, well, I didn't forget. I was so nervous. I turned off my intuition. I knew the guy that kidnapped me was not my date. I knew it, but I was so nervous about my date.
Yeah.
I just turned that off and didn't listen to what was going on inside. And so part of my process has been relearning how to tune into that and trust it. That's a big one. But anyway, yeah. That
Uh, yeah,
so
that's it.
that quote just kind of puts it in my face. I'm not a human being having a spiritual experience. I'm a spiritual being having a human experience. It is people's spirits that drive our relationships and our connections with family and friends and colleagues and all of those things, whether we choose to admit it. But I choose to admit it. So I'm there.
All right. Are you warmed up, Alexis?
Yeah.
All right. So we've kind of hinted to what's coming. So take me back to that time. You're 17 years old as a self-described nerdy teenager, right? And you're about to go on a blind date that, I mean, that one going on dates at 17, that's such a big thing, right? Like you're getting out,
Sure.
you're finally addressing some fears about, oh my God, will I be rejected? Will this person like me or not? It's a very normal thing, but then it ends up changing your life forever. So talk us through that moment.
Well, I was not a person that went on many dates as a teenager. Being a music nerd, I was not really in the in crowd, so to speak. So dating was not something that I did a lot of. And I was at that age where I was starting to do some of that. And um, I had an opportunity from my an acquaintance at church. Actually, it was one of my adult sponsors or whatever.
Sure.
Anyway, she had a nephew that was moving into the area and was new to the area, and she was trying to introduce him to people. And so I set up a blind date. The long story short is I set up a blind date to go with him. And we had talked on the phone and we shared what we were going to be wearing and found a safe place to connect, or what I thought was a safe place to connect
Sure.
at church. And so I was very excited about it. Um, but I had never seen him. I had never met him. All I knew that was he was going to be wearing jeans and he had a beard. That's
So this
all I
was
knew.
for our community out there. This is pre-social media, so you couldn't really like look people up and find their pictures. You're literally just going off a name and a phone number and conversations over the phone.
That's correct.
Yeah.
That's correct. I had every reason to believe that this person was trustworthy because of where the connection came from. Anyway, so my agreement was to meet him. My dad worked at the church, and we were going to meet at the church, and I was just going to wait in his car, and then he was going to drive. So he was going to retrieve me, and then we were going to go on our date. And
Sure.
I saw somebody hanging out that had a beard and was wearing blue jeans. And here I am in downtown Fort Worth, not.
Oh, okay. So you're in a big city.
Yeah. So anyway, I see him and he just keeps looking at the car, and it's time for my date and I'm nervous. And when I first see him, I think, oh my God, that can't be him, because he didn't look very kept. Maybe
Oh,
that's the best
okay.
way to
Yeah.
say it. But I thought, okay. He starts walking over to the car, and at first I didn't trust it. So I roll my window down and ask him if he's so and so's nephew, and he answers correctly. And I'm still, my gut is saying no, this is not him.
Was your dad still in the car with you at that point?
No, he wasn't in the car.
So,
The car was parked at the building where he worked.
okay.
So he was working,
Yeah.
and I was just waiting in the car as
Okay.
a place for us to meet, because he wasn't familiar with the church at all or anything like
Sure.
that. So anyway, um, so I asked him if his name was the
Right.
name of my person I was going on a date with, and he answered, he had a 50-50 chance of answering correctly, and he did. And so I'm getting myself out of the car to go with him on my date. And he sticks a knife in my side and says, "Get back in the car and unlock the back door."
Oh, wow.
And I knew that was not my date. I just
Yeah.
knew that was not my date. And as it
Right.
turned out, it was not my date.
Yeah.
But yeah, he asked me to let him into the back seat of the car. Don't try anything funny. Of course, he had a knife, so
Yeah.
I'm immediately fearful for my life, and I immediately go into survival mode, just whatever that takes.
Sure.
So I did what he asked me to do, and when he got in the car, he climbed over the between the seats in the car and
Right.
climbed over into the front seat with the knife in hand the whole way. And he says, "Drive." And I'm like, "Okay, where am I going?"
Oh, no. Okay. So you
you
guys are
know,
mobile then.
yeah. He, so I drove and asked for as many directions as I could to figure out where we were going. He said, I want to marry you and take you to California and marry you." And the direction he had me go drive was not the way to get to California.
Okay. Yeah.
So I knew that my life was in danger, and I had to do what I had to do to survive. I
Sure.
mean, that's just what immediately kicked in. I had a cousin who was a forensic chemist for the state of Oklahoma, and she worked primarily rape cases.
Sure.
And I had talked with her, and one of the things she said is, "Get to know them, get to know everything you can about them."
Oh,
So that
wow.
part of my brain, just I turned into a little
Like a detective.
crime scene investigator, and tried to learn as much as I could. Unfortunately, he didn't talk very much, and I had to be careful and balance. Do I ask him if I push him too far and he gets pissed off? I'm as good as gone,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
I've got this knife going on. It was raining, so I tried doing a couple of things to draw attention to myself. I tried driving fast.
Sure.
Driving fast. I drove with my brights on, and when it wasn't raining, I left my windshield wipers on. I was just desperate to find any way to draw attention to myself. But here I am in a car in a big city, and nobody's paying attention. When
Yeah.
you've got people around you driving all the time, you're not paying attention to who's around you. You're
Sure.
just driving. You're going to where you're going.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's how it kicked off.
Where do you guys end up then?
So he ended up, we pulled off the highway. We were driving toward Corsicana, and he had me pull off of the highway onto a dirt road, and it was raining, so it was muddy. And the car, it, I was doing everything I could to just keep things as even keel as possible. Anyway, we get stuck in the mud, and that's when he raped me the first time. So once that process took place and we had to get out, I mean, we had to get unstuck somehow. He rifled through some tools my dad had in the back of the car and found some glass doorknobs and put those under the wheels to try to get traction on the car. And I thought, geez, if he's not in the car and
Yeah.
I get traction, I can take off. I can
Right.
just take off.
Yeah.
Well, I couldn't ever get it unstuck. So he ends up trying to push the car. We did everything we could to get it loosened up. And finally he started driving. Um, I didn't know how to get a car unstuck in the mud.
Sure. Yeah. You're 17.
That wasn't my
Right.
my thing. But anyway, he ends up getting in the driver's seat and at that point and gets the car unstuck. So my thoughts and my plan to get away, to run, there was no way I could run. My legs shook. I was in such
Yeah.
shock about the whole thing. My body just trembled miserably.
Right.
And I did everything I could to control that. But the harder I tried to control it, it was like the worse it got.
Sure.
But anyway, that's just my body handling the stress. So anyway, we finally get unstuck and we get back on the highway, and he stops at a gas station because I noticed that the we're about out of gas. And I'm like, oh shit, do I say anything to him or what
Right.
do I do? So I just said we might want to think about stopping for some gas. And he looks at the gas gauge, and sure enough, it's just right on E. It's gonna happen. So we start looking for a gas station, and I don't have any money. I had, in my process of trying to figure out what was going on, I asked him if he wanted money or whatever, and so I didn't have any. I was
Yeah.
going on a date, and he was going to pay,
Right.
right?
Right. Yeah.
So I didn't have any. I think I had about maybe $2 and some change in
Right.
my purse. That wasn't enough to fill up the car, and I didn't have a credit card or anything like that. So anyway, but in our conversations about that, he didn't respond when I asked him if he wanted money or what. So I didn't that I didn't get any information about that.
Sure.
Anyway, we finally find a gas station, and he pulls into it. It's a big truck stop type gas station, and he of course pulls into a stall that is farthest from the door
Yeah.
to keep attention on us as minimal as possible. So I'm thinking the whole time, how can I get attention?
Yeah.
How do I draw attention to myself? And we didn't have any money for gas. So he starts going through the tools in the back of the car and finds some tools to sell and for money for
Yeah.
gas.
Yeah.
And of course, in my teenage brain, I'm thinking, oh my God, you're stealing my dad's tools.
Right.
you know?
Yeah.
So anyway, he sells. I fail to get any attention when he goes to the gas station to sell the tools and all that stuff. He takes the keys with him, so I don't have any way to drive off.
Yeah.
And like I said, I was trembling so bad. I
Yeah.
knew that my legs were not going to support me. And think about being at a gas station and somebody coming up to your window saying, I need your help. I need help.
Right. Yeah.
How, that is a risky proposition. And he had sight on me the whole time.
Mm.
So um, the fear I had for my life, I just couldn't, there was no opportunity that presented itself that was safe enough for me to try to get attention. Anyway, he gets gas, fills up the car, we start heading south. Again, not toward California.
Right.
But anyway, he goes south and we end up in Galveston and drive basically through the night. I think it was 3 o'clock in the morning or something when we got there.
So how far is that away from you, hours wise?
About 5 hours.
Oh, that's a good
Five
ways
and a
from
half.
home then.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and he's driving. So anyway, he pulls off. We get to Galveston. We pull up next to the seawall, and he decides he needs to sleep. And I'm
Yeah.
like, whatever you do, don't go to sleep.
Right.
You know, so I pretended to be sleeping when he was sleeping, and he finally asked to turn the radio on, and I was glad for that because I wanted to know kind of where we were going
Sure.
and what time it was, and you know, my little
Yeah.
crime scene investigator was putting all this together and trying to collect as much detail as I could.
Right.
And he left the radio on when, as it turned out, the radio in the car didn't work, and my dad had rigged a radio that was down by the floorboard in the
Sure.
car, and it was directly connected to the battery.
So it drains your
So
car.
you didn't have to have the car on to
Yeah.
run the radio anyway. So about I don't know, it was probably 6 o'clock in the morning. He wakes up and stirs, and he starts driving again, and I'm asking, where are we going? Where are we going? Where are we going? And he drives to East Beach in Galveston and drives again away from cars and drives out onto the beach. And that time of morning, there aren't very many people at the beach.
Yeah.
There's no one there. So that's where he raped me a second time. Now, between the time he raped me the first time and the second time, I realized that I was hemorrhaging. He had not cut me or anything, but my body was just handling that stress
Sure.
that way. So
Yeah.
I was hemorrhaging, and I was hemorrhaging pretty good.
Right.
So by the time he decided to rape me the second time, I'm covered in blood, and I'm fearing for my life the whole time.
Sure.
What do I do? Do I tell him? Do I not tell him? If I don't tell him and he finds out and he gets mad,
Right.
you know, all of those things are going through your head. And so I did tell him, and I in my desperate efforts for him not to rape me again, I told him that I had a venereal disease. I
Yeah.
thought, oh my God, that'll scare him.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Didn't hear that whatsoever. No response to that. It was like anything I tried to make myself unattractive or to instill some sense of fear in him about me or anything like that was a failure. So he rapes me a second time, even though I'm a bloody mess,
Sure.
literally. And when he gets done, he realizes that I've got to do something to clean myself up. So he takes me to another gas station and pulls in. It's a small town gas station type thing, not one of these big truck stop gas stations like we were at the first time. And he pulls up over by the restroom door, and he asked me to go in and clean myself up. And that was the first time that there was something between us. There was a door. I tried to lock the bathroom door. Who knows if the bathroom door lock worked?
Right.
Who knows? But I knew from my cousin that I couldn't do anything to clean myself up because it would erase all of the evidence that he raped me. So I went to the bathroom and I'm leaking blood all over the floor, and it looks like a war zone by the time I leave. It's horrible.
Sure.
And I washed my outside clothes, but not my underwear or
Right.
anything like that, because I knew I had to preserve that evidence.
Yeah.
And I remembered that I might have a notepad in my purse. And I did.
Oh,
And I
wow.
found a pen and wrote a note on the paper. Please, here's the phone number. Please call my parents. Tell them I am okay, but I am in trouble and I need help. He says he wants to marry me and take me to California, and tell them that I'm in Galveston, whatever.
Oh, wow.
So I leave a note in the bathroom. He's growing increasingly impatient. I keep thinking, oh, I'm just going to take as long as I can. Maybe the door's locked. Maybe I can holler in the vents and somebody will hear me. But he's standing outside the door.
Mm.
So I don't know which way to go there.
Right.
So anyway, he gets impatient. He starts knocking on the door, and you need to hurry it up and get out. So I put my wet pants back on.
Yeah.
And go back out to the car. And of course, he's driving, and he takes me to a friend's house. Anyway, he stops at this house, and the house is way up on the hill, and he leaves me in the car. I can't go in. I'm covered in blood. And that would be, he couldn't do that. So he left me in the car, took the keys again. I thought about running to somebody's house, couldn't run to the house. Again, my legs are trembling. And what do you do if you go to somebody's house and you're covered in blood? What's that going to do to people?
Right.
What are they going to think anyway? So he stands by the front door, and he never goes in the house. So he's keeping an eye on the car the whole time. So that was another factor in my decision process. But anyway, he finally comes back, and he brings his friends with him. He wants to introduce me to his friends, and they were people that they were his prison buddies.
Oh, shit.
And I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, what,
right.
How do I deal with this? Anyway, he never, they introduced me. I knew that I had to be pleasant, but I didn't want to encourage anything.
Yeah.
So I just said as little as possible. He gets in the car, he's in the driver's seat, and they're standing outside of the car where the window is. They never try to come around to my side of the car or anything like that. They wrap up their conversation, and I'm like, phew. I'm not going to have to, because I didn't know what to expect. Anyway, he drives to a little cafe in a shady part of town. Let's just say it was a rundown little cafe. And again, leaves me in the car. I can't go in. And he essentially stole $20 from the cafe, comes back out to the car, makes me promise that I will never tell anybody about what has happened. He will come back and kill me if I say anything. And eventually he gives me the $20 and makes me kiss him goodbye. And there I am.
He leaves you there.
He leaves me there, but
Takes
I'm in
your,
the car, but
okay.
I'm in the car and I have the keys. So I shift myself over the console to the driver's seat and get in the car, lock all the doors, roll up all the windows,
Yeah.
whatever, and just start driving. And I do everything in my power to just watch for signs to get back. While we were on the highway, I made mental note of where we were as best I could,
Sure.
so I could retrace my steps if I needed to. And I knew that I was in Galveston and we had gone through Houston and all of these things. So I knew kind of how to get back on track to find my way home. Anyway,
Wow. Good for
so
you for having presence of mind to do all those things.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, there's so much going through your mind to be able to, I guess, take control of at least that aspect, right? You're not
right.
in control of so much, but you're in control of gathering information and data and knowing where you're at. So do you end up making it home then?
I did make it home. I drove myself home. I did have to stop for gas.
Yeah.
We were in a little Datsun wagon. So I didn't have a huge gas tank or anything.
Right.
But yeah, I did. I drove myself home. And again, when I stopped for gas, I fortunately there were still self-service stations
Yeah.
back in the day.
Right.
And I knew that a gas attendant would come out to the car, and I didn't want him to be afraid from all the blood. So
Sure.
before I stopped at the gas station, I stopped on the access road or whatever and got a little rug or something out of the back of the car
Okay.
and just wrapped myself up so
Yeah.
nobody could see.
Mm.
Anyway, fill
So,
up the car and go home.
yeah. So what happens to this guy? You end up going to the police?
So I did. I did. As soon as I got home, we called the police, and of course, my modus operandi the whole way was he's never getting away with this.
Sure.
So
Good for you. Yeah.
he's never getting away with this. So my intent all along was to report it and get him off the street. I mean, that was my deal.
Right.
So yeah, when I got home, we called the police and they came out and asked questions, and mom saw blood running down the front of the chair where I was sitting and said, "Do you think we might need to go to the hospital?"
Yeah.
Of course, by then we're going, I knew I would have to go through a rape exam. I didn't
Yeah.
know what those terms were and what that meant
Yeah.
at that age.
Sure.
But yeah, we ended up going to the hospital, and I finished answering all the questions of the police and so on and so forth. So that was Thanksgiving week that he kidnapped me on Sunday before Thanksgiving. So,
Mm.
um, and Thanksgiving family is a big thing
Sure.
for us at Thanksgiving. And we usually always went to see our grandparents in Kansas and in Oklahoma on the way to Kansas. Anyway, so while we were um, making that trip to we made it to Oklahoma City to see my mom's parents and all of those family people.
Right.
Anyway, um, that night that we spent with my grandmother in Oklahoma City, they arrested him.
Okay. Where did they find him?
They found him exactly where I told him he was. in that
Okay.
same area. I gave him a full description of the
Oh,
little
wow.
cafe that he pulled up in and everything, and they took it. They arrested him right there.
Mm.
Come to find out, he grew up in Galveston, so he was real familiar with the area. And so anyway, uh, so we're in Oklahoma City. We end up going to Kansas. So I knew when I came back from that trip that I would have to identify him in a lineup. My cousin, my
Yeah,
forensic chemist cousin, was part of the Oklahoma City family, and she
sure.
was there, of course. And that was the first time that I could cry or
Mm.
feel any emotion about what had happened, was that night. And I was so glad she was there. She really helped me through that process, and we talked to her about the legal process and what all we needed to do and that
Right.
kind of thing. But I was so glad, I was so fortunate to be part of a family structure that supported each other and that kind of thing. Anyway, so I just bawled. I
Yeah.
just bawled and I bawled and bawled, and I didn't think I would ever stop.
Yeah.
um, but I did. And we ended up going to Kansas and so on and so forth. But anyway, while I was talking to Janice through that process, she was explaining to me that I would have to go and identify him in a lineup and all of that stuff. But I needed to do it very quickly because they couldn't hold him forever.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So as soon as we got back in town, that Monday, I think it was the Monday after Thanksgiving, we went downtown and I identified him, and
How
I
was
knew
that
it.
facing him again?
Yeah, that was interesting. He had cut his hair and shaved his beard. And but I knew those beady blue eyes like nobody's business. I knew immediately
Mm.
that they had him as
Yeah.
soon as I walked into the room. Of course, it was he couldn't see me, but I
Hmm.
could see him. And um I knew who he was before he even said anything. So as soon as they asked him to step up and say something, I said, "That's him.
Yeah.
That's him. Are you sure?"
Yeah.
"Yeah, I'm sure." So anyway, he gets charged with aggravated kidnap. As it turned out, I hemorrhaged so badly, there was no proof that he raped me.
Mm.
Um, so if we were to press charges for the rape, I would have had to have gone to Corsicana and Galveston, because
Different
that's where
venues.
the because that's where the rapes took place.
Sure.
So and there was no physical evidence. And after deliberating with my cousin and
Yeah.
talking to people and so on and so forth, I was a teenager. I was in school. I didn't know how much school I would miss if I
Right.
tried to press charges, whatever. He pled guilty to aggravated kidnap, and that's what he got. And he got 12 years for that.
Okay.
And he had 3 years on a prior prison sentence. He was on parole when he did this to me. So they tacked the 3 years onto that. So he got 15 years. He was out in 2.5.
Uh, how did that, I mean, it hits me hard right now, and it's been all these years later. How did you handle that? How did your family handle that when that was the recourse?
Well, um, we sought some legal advice about that. And I knew that threat is still there. You tell anybody, I'll come back and
Sure.
kill you. That is still a present threat for me. And I wanted um, to protect myself, and my parents wanted to protect me as much as possible.
Yeah.
So Dad, as it turned out, had an acquaintance that was in the FBI, and he graciously put the fear of God in him, that if he was ever seen anywhere near me,
Yeah.
he would they'd kill him or whatever. Um, and as it turns out, I've never seen him again. I have seen people that looked like him a couple of times, but I have never seen him, and I would recognize him in a heartbeat.
Sure.
That face and is etched in my memory. Will forever be there. But anyway, um, so that's what we did. I mean, in the state of Texas, they would not keep somebody in prison for rape until they had been convicted twice.
Yeah.
And he did not get convicted with me.
Right.
And his prior offense had nothing to do with rape. Well, he did. He raped his aunt in Galveston. But yeah.
So, Alexis, thank you again so much for sharing that story and having the courage to relive it, right? Like you can't share that without reliving it. But I wanted to talk to you about something I found fascinating, and that is that you realize there's more than one side to a story
Oh, yeah.
for this, and that you've spent part of the last 40 years working with offenders themselves
Yeah.
to develop their caring self, is what you call it. Talk to me about coming to that realization that, wait, like maybe these people that are actually offending need help too.
Yeah. So in my recovery process, I got very involved in rape crisis here
Mhm.
in Fort Worth. And I got to a point where, and it doesn't happen overnight. I'm going to buzz through this part of it, but there's nothing that buzzes through this part of it in real life.
No,
Let me just say that.
sure.
But in my recovery process, I realized that this was a two-sided issue. There are victims and there are offenders. And when I got through to a level with my own survival mechanism in that, I thought there's got to be a way to interrupt the cycle somehow.
Mhm.
So I went to my rape crisis friends and I said, "Are you aware of any programs or anything where victims talk to offenders?" And they were not aware of any in the area at all. And I said, "Well, what if? What if? Is that an option?" So after some research and putting together some programs, they found a resource that was willing to do that. This particular therapist worked at MHMR, and they had offender treatment programs through MHMR. And so we gave it a try just to see what it was all about. And
Sure.
let me tell you, that is a scary, there is no higher tension in a room than when a victim goes into a room full of offenders.
Yeah, I can only imagine.
And that's how it all got started. That's how I got started with that. And I wasn't very good at it at first, because the first time I came in contact with offenders, I was so full of hate and rage. How in the world could another
Yeah.
human being do this to another human being?
Alexis,
I,
how old were you? Like how much time had passed between your 17-year-old blind date that goes this way and your first time facing offenders?
I was a young adult. I was in my 20s,
Okay.
late 20s,
Okay.
late, mid to late 20s,
And
I
you're still
guess.
full of rage then. You're still,
Well, I was at the beginning. And
yeah.
I realized, though, that when when I go in there and I talk to them and I beat them up, like they, in the process of those groups, they go around and introduce themselves and talk about what their offenses are.
Oh, wow.
And I remember this as clear as day. There was one of them that just went on and on and on about his offense. And when he finally finished, I said, well, it was like he was proud of
Oh.
it. And I looked him straight in the eye and I said, do you want a cookie or something?
Oh. You said that to him.
I said that to him.
What's his response there?
uh,
Did he get
that
quiet?
shut him up.
Good.
That shut him up.
Yeah.
But he had no idea what he was going through. But I bring that up because my awareness was, if I go in there and beat him up and say, you're bad, 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 I'm not getting anywhere with that dialogue.
Mm.
So I learned within myself that I wanted to open the dialogue. I want them to be aware of what they're doing to other people. So there has to be a platform where they feel safe enough to talk. And they are so convinced that what they've done is that there's nothing wrong with what they've done. There's a denial system. And part of what we learned in the process was we don't talk to offenders unless they have come to a point where they're willing to accept responsibility for what they've done.
Okay.
So that was a big stepping stone. But getting to a point where I could engage in conversation with them, I learned. I did this several times, and I learned every time I went. And some of the lessons were internal for me. I did a lot of growing myself personally in that process. But I knew that if I was going to make an impact with that audience, I had to engage them in dialogue. I had to get them to a point where they could relate to a feeling somehow, so I could get to their feeling selves. If I sit in a room full of sex offenders and ask them, do you want to hurt people or do you want to care about people? 9 times out of 10, their response to that is, I want to care about people. Mm-hmm. So how do I get them to care? Right?
Yeah.
So I knew that was really key. So to get them to an emotion, I did this. I took a piece of paper. I gave them each a piece of paper and had them write a word that represented something that was important to them. I didn't look at them. I gathered them up, put them in a box or whatever, and just pulled one out and tore it. Just didn't even read it. Just tore it up. And then asked them how that felt. Yeah. Well, gosh, they're crushed. I didn't even take the time to read it.
Yeah.
Bingo. That is exactly what it feels like to me.
Oh,
I was
wow.
a person. This is me. I was a person. What you did to me is this.
Yeah.
And then after I tore the piece of paper and we talk about those feelings and what that's like, then I try to tape it back together. Well, is this the same piece of paper?
Right.
Yeah. Can I make this the same piece of paper it was before I tore it up? Before I wadded it up?
Sure.
Will it ever be the same?
Right.
No, it won't. So I finally had an avenue to talk to them about real things and feelings.
Yeah.
So then back to the conversation about care and hurt. It's so obvious to them when they're not thinking about their own selves,
yeah,
that they want to care about people. That's an obvious answer, right? It is the hardest thing in the world to do. So what do I have to do to get them to keep that care switch on? We have to talk about that. It takes energy. it took energy for me to deal with all the stuff I was
Oh, for
dealing with,
sure.
right?
What would you
But I
say
had
were
to make
the,
a choice.
I'm sorry,
Anyway,
what would you say were the biggest things you learned about yourself in those moments?
I I learned real quickly that there was no blame for me.
You
That
mean not to blame yourself?
yes,
Okay.
to feel shameful about what happened to me or anything like that. These people just simply do not care. You know, I talked about him trying to get him to be afraid by sharing
Yeah.
that I had a venereal disease or whatever. I didn't, but
Right.
I was trying to convince him so he wouldn't hurt me. Um, and he just didn't even hear it. He just didn't even hear that. And that is so common with offenders. They just turn that part of themselves off.
Mm.
If and I've asked offenders this, if you looked your victims in the eye, would you still be able to rape them?
What was a response?
Most of the time, the answer to that question is no, because
Really?
they would see that person as a person.
Yeah.
If they looked them in the eye, they became real. And they knew that for them to execute their offenses, they couldn't make that human
Yeah.
connection.
Mm.
So, boy, that was eye opening for me.
Yeah.
There wasn't anything I did to ask for what happened to me. There wasn't anything I did to encourage him or anything like that. That was the most profound way for me to learn that lesson, was sitting in a room talking with them. Um, it also helped me to see that I had a strength that I didn't know I had,
What was that strength?
to remember that I was a person,
Mm.
to accept that I was a person, that I was a whole person, and there was nothing about me that deserved to be treated that way.
Yeah.
Um, in my recovery process, recovering from rape is a lifetime process. You never get over it. This is not a wound. You put a band aid on and rip the band aid off, and you're all done.
Right.
This is something that happens to someone's heart, and they are forever changed by that.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are, when I was first going through my recovery process, it was hard. I had nightmares. I didn't want to eat. You can't tell looking at me today, but I was probably a little anorexic, but
Sure.
just because I I didn't want to eat at
Yeah.
all. I thought it would be so much easier. That I did get to a point where I thought, this is too hard. It's too hard to get up in the morning and realize I'm going to have to face this. I'm going to have to face what's going on in my head, the nightmares, the thoughts, the memories, all of
Yeah.
those things are so profound. And I did get to a point where I'm like, okay, I'm out. It would be so much. Why the fuck did he not kill me?
Yeah.
I really wondered that, and
Sure.
I wanted out. I hurt so bad on the inside. It was too hard to get up and pretend. It got to a point where
Yeah.
it was too hard to get up and pretend that this was not a part of who I was. And I just I was ready to commit suicide. I was
Yeah.
out. And my dad was a pastoral counselor, and long story short, I asked him if he knew of anybody I could talk to.
Yeah.
And the person he referred me to was an Episcopal priest. And he is about as ordinary as the life as the day is long. There's nothing priesty about him. If he didn't
Yeah.
have his collar on, you'd never know that he
Right.
was an Episcopal priest. But one of the things he said to me, and this was the tipping point for me. One of the things he said to me was, "It sounds to me like you did everything right.
Yeah.
You're sitting here talking to me today. I
Yeah.
think what you did was the right thing to do, so we could have that conversation." And that's when I began to realize that I had value and worth.
Mm.
And talking with offenders and remembering that and listening to their conversations about how they deal with people, whether it's work people or families or anything like that, it's very obvious to me that they're so disconnected with what's going on in here,
Mm.
in
In their heart.
hearts, that it's just easy for them. It's easy for them to just not see a person as a person and hurt them. They're doing it because they want control in their lives. They're
Mm-hmm.
doing it because they had experiences of their own. Now, every now and then, when I'm talking with offenders, I do find somebody who's just empty.
Oh,
Just there's nothing there. There's
sure.
nobody home.
Right.
And
It,
those are people that I cannot touch. I can't help them.
yeah.
They have to want to be connected. But
Yeah.
anyway,
It's interesting me listening to this. Um, right. You can't hate hate enough to fix it.
that's
Right.
right.
Like you can never out hate somebody else that hates. Like that doesn't. So it's in listening to this, it's you turn to love is essentially what I'm hearing, right? Is you
Yeah,
turn to love yourself and realize that you weren't responsible for this, but
right.
you're gonna grow from this, right? Even though it wasn't your choosing and nobody would ever choose that. And then you shared caring and love to offenders because you can't hate them enough to fix yourself.
That's right.
And I think that's such a great lesson for our world in general, right? Is we if things are trying, if things are challenging, look to love, look to caring.
Yeah. The most important thing we can do with one another is give people recognition for being a person.
Hmm.
And that takes getting in touch with emotions. I just I'm on a mission today.
I love it. I love it when people are on a mission, right? We're not just going through life on autopilot. We're on a mission. What's your mission today,
I
Alexa?
am on a mission to wake up people's emotions,
I love
to
it.
help people understand that emotions are not to be feared. They are
No,
to help us learn.
yeah.
And whether you're angry or you're sad or you're happy or you're whatever the emotion is, once we can recognize what's going on, then we have an opportunity to learn from it.
Mm. Alexis, thank you so much for joining us this week. It's been, I just want to thank you again for sharing your story and the reliving it to so that other people can learn and grow along with you. And where can our community connect with you to get your amazing book, which is a bestseller? Congratulations on that. Invisible
Thank you.
Wounds, an inside story. Where can they find your book and where would you like them to connect with you to be part of your community?
Um, they can get the book on Amazon. They can get the book on my website, alexisfaere.com. It's ALEXISFAERE. I spell that a little funny, but anyway,
Yeah.
alexisfaere.com. Um, if you go to Amazon to buy the book, if you search for the title, Invisible Wounds, an Inside Story, it will not come up because the graphic nature of the detail that's in the book when I write about the rape experience, I write about the whole thing.
Sure.
I skipped over a lot of those details
Yeah.
today.
Yeah. So, yeah.
But if you Google search the book, if you just search for Invisible Wounds, Alexis Faere, it'll come up and you can get to it that way.
Awesome.
But it's available on Amazon. Yeah.
Awesome. Alexis, thank you so much again for the courage you're living your life, and I support your mission full heartedly, right? Like let's go out and let's awake people to their emotions. Thank you so much.
Thank you.